Yeah, so the COPS thing, right? It's called COPS 26, and people are thinking, well, what does COPS mean? Believe it or not, it means Conference of the Parties. Okay, that's an extremely Orwellian name, Conference of the Parties. You know, that's like something literally out of 1984. Who are the parties involved here? Who knows? Anyway, this is the 26th of the Conference of the Parties, which is being billed as a climate change emergency. And as I mentioned last week, what they're hoping to do is to, in this run up, in the next month, they're aiming to scare us all with the idea that the world's going to drown in a few years. And also, which it's not going to do, by the way, you can take my word for that. And so they're going to promote the Extinction Rebellion nutters, because I mean, these are people who have never had a proper hobby in their life, right? And then they're probably totally, I'll just leave that thought, I'll just park that thought there. But these are people who basically think they can change the world through taking their clothes off in public in the centre of London. And of course, these days they can get away with that because the government's basically cheering them on. I mean, I say the government, I mean the whole of Parliament, everybody is in on this. And it's such an intangible, weird concept. This idea that in 400 years' time, you know, the oceans are going to rise by an inch, and there's going to be people on a deserted island somewhere who are all going to get flooded, and that I've got to care about that. Well, I don't care about people getting flooded on a desert island 400 years from now, because I know that if the oceans rise an inch, in 400 years' time, the people on that desert island will have found a way to move to safety 1 inch higher. Okay? Because humanity always finds a way to deal with it. So there's nothing to worry about. I'll tell you what I worry about. I worry about plastic in the oceans. I worry about litter in the park. These are sort of tangible things that I can be concerned about and I can do things about. But I don't care about the climate changing in hundreds of years, because I know that humans will deal with it. So this sort of language that we're always hearing about, there's a climate emergency, there's a climate catastrophe, that's all just bunkum. It's all just bunkum, and it's all intangible nonsense. And it's like a modern day, it's like in the old days, you know, in the medieval period, they would try to scare you with all sorts of intangible fears. And this is just the modern version of that. And what I worry about specifically is the extent to which they're pushing this in schools and scaring children and thereby corrupting their development, because children should be looking to the world, looking to the future with hope, with optimism, with happiness, with a can-do attitude. And they're throwing all these existential fears and intangible fears upon these young children at school and overloading their minds with fear of catastrophe, all of which is just nonsense, absolute gibberish. And this is the approach you have to take with these people. You can't go, well, I sort of agree with a bit of that. You just have to go, no, you're all wrong. You're all wrong on it. And it has to just be swept away, because they will keep pushing and pushing and pushing. And I saw yesterday the Green Goblin, the flower pot man, who is now, what's he called? I don't know if he's yet been called a deputy first minister, but him and his crew of fruitcakes are now part of the misnamed Scottish government. I'm talking, of course, about the leader of the Scottish Green Party. And he put out a tweet, and I have it here, and I'll just read it out for you. But he was crowing about the fact that Glasgow City Council is going to not allow their public buildings to be used by, quote, those who deny, ignore, or willfully contribute to catastrophic climate change. I mean, what a load of rubbish. Those who deny, ignore, or willfully contribute. Well, who on earth is that? And what does that actually mean? I mean, I certainly ignore catastrophic climate change, just as I ignore absolutely everything else that comes out of that person's mouth. I don't ignore it, I fight against it because it's all just lies. And, we need to get our heads back on our shoulders again. We need to screw our heads on properly and realize when we're being played by people who don't understand reality. I mean, these people don't understand the nature of life at all. And they'll just give us all of these existential fears and nonsense and expect us to believe it. And then they will deny public buildings to us. Now, people might say, well, what he's talking about there is he's talking about denying public buildings to, Shell Oil, if that still exists, I don't know, BP, those sorts of places. Yes, that's what he's talking about, but he's actually, the way that he's framed that is he's really talking about you and I. He's really talking about people who disagree with him on anything. So that's a very bad precedent to be set. And you always have to remember, when you're dealing with these people, you are dealing with fanatics. You're dealing with fundamentalists, people who will not brook any opposition. And the more power they get given, the more power they will take to themselves and hold and keep. And so, yeah, we're moving into difficult times, but as long as you can understand that you're being played, then that's half the battle. That's half the battle.